All right, let's get going. Hello out there. My name is Jim, and welcome to the July 14th drone office hours. So this week I have something, I have a demo prepared that is related to a topic that has come up in the drone Slack, in the drone community Slack recently, where a couple people have asked how to run multiple or route multiple pipelines to multiple Kubernetes clusters on different runners, different Kubernetes clusters. So that is totally possible with drone. And the solution is not specific to any one technology. It's not specific to Kubernetes. Anywhere you would run a Docker runner, you could take advantage of what I'll be showing. So you could be running runners in data centers, in different clouds. Yeah, anywhere you can run a runner. If you follow this process, you can route your pipelines to one or another as needed. So I'll be showing how to combine runner labels with routing to ensure that pipeline stage executes on a specific runner. And as part of this, since I'll be talking about Kubernetes, I want to highlight the new drone runner Docker Helm chart. So if you've done anything with drone in Kubernetes before, you've probably been using the Kube runner, the Kubernetes runner, and that's fine. That's a specific kind of runner that was intended to run Kubernetes-based pipelines. So each step runs in a pod. The Docker runner, of course, has been around for a very long time, and it just has a dependency on Docker. It's not specific to Kubernetes. And now there is a Helm chart that will let you run the Docker runner as a deployment in Kubernetes, where it actually uses the Docker and Docker container as a sidecar to run Docker-based pipelines. So it's now another option for running pipelines in Kubernetes, which is pretty cool. So I'll be showing that. Here is a somewhat crude diagram of what I'm going to be doing here. So on my laptop, I'll be running drone, the drone server, and I've brought up two Kubernetes clusters. One just called Jim Drone Cluster 1. The other is Jim Drone Cluster 2. And I have Docker runners in each, both running in a namespace called drone that I created. So, and within there, I brought each of these up, passing an environment variable, drone runner labels, cluster 1 for the first and cluster 2 for the second. So that's all the magic on the runner side that's going to make this work. So to do this, I've got to do a Helm install command, and then I'll also need a secret. So the RPC secret, this is a string that runners use to authenticate with the drone server. So this has to be set to each of your runners, and it's not something you want to check into your source control, of course. So a good way to manage this is as a secret in your Kubernetes namespace. So that's the second command down here. So I've run that already, so I don't have to show it as part of this, but I'll run the Helm install command above now. We'll do it live for each cluster. So let's jump over into my terminal. So here's my two cluster 1, cluster 2 values files. I'll just show them real quick. So this is how the Helm chart for the drone Docker runner. This is all you have to specify in your values file. This is all you need to track in your repository if you're going to use this cluster. This chart, that's the word I'm looking for. So this chart will read any secret that you specify in this list of extra secret names from env for env from. So that's where I put the RPC secret that I showed in the slide just a second ago and created previously with a kubectl command. And then the environment variables that get passed to the runner. I'm running my local drone with ngrok in front of it. So this is my ngrok URL that I've been given. It uses SSL, so it's going to use HTTPS. So I set that protocol variable. And then here's that label that I was showing earlier, the cluster one drone runner labels environment variable. And then I'm just setting drone debug so I get some more log output from the runner. So hopefully that's all pretty straightforward. So now I will do this helm install command. Actually, no, first, let's see. Let me just show with the two contexts that I have. So kubectx, it's a nice little utility that will show you your different Kubernetes contexts. So here's my cluster one context and cluster two. And so cluster one is definitely the right one for this command I'll run. It's always good to verify. Should take just a minute. So I previously run my Helm install commands for the drone charts, for the drone charts repository. --devel, I should mention that's important because right now the drone runner Docker chart is a release candidate. It's not, yeah, it's still considered experimental since I just recently wrote it. But so far it's been very stable for what I've been doing. So that is that parameter there. In case you're wondering, normally you wouldn't pass that for most charts. So that's great. The output looks good. Let's see what came up in my namespace. Get pods running 54 seconds, looks good. Get deployment, maybe. Look at that too, that also looks good. We can maybe get some log output. Dash. And I believe this will tell me I have to specify a container, right? Yeah. So if I try to look at logs, it's going to tell me, hey, you've got two pods, or you've got two containers in that pod. Which one do you want? So I want the drone runner Docker. Here's that. The other container is Docker, Docker and Docker, the sidecar. So let's see if we can just check the logs on the drone runner Docker container. This is taking longer than I would expect. I'm surprised. I don't know what is taking so long. I've never seen a log. Oh, that's why. Apparently I just needed to send it some input. Very weird. Okay. Thanks, kubectl. So some log output from that first runner. This all looks good. This is really what you want to look for. Successfully ping the Docker daemon and successfully ping the remote server. And then it pulls and all looks good. So now I can jump over into my other cluster and run that same Helm install command. This time, cluster 2 values. So I should show that first, right? I showed you the cluster 1 values. I'll show you the cluster 2 values. So everything is the same except for the label is now cluster 2 instead of cluster 1. Okay, so let's install that into the other cluster this time. Cool. Same successful output from Helm as before. You get pods again. Looks good. deployment also looks good. And then we can do a log command like we did before. But for the new pod name, because this is a different cluster, pod name is going to be different, right? Great. See, that's what's supposed to happen. The logs are supposed to come right back like that. I don't know what was wrong with my shell previously where it took so long until I give it some input. So here we go. The success messages that we want to see, successfully pinged remote server. So now I have two runners, both in different Kubernetes clusters, both with unique labels, and they're ready to start taking in and executing pipelines. So I have this repository that I've created just for this demo. And here's a drone YAML file. So I've got two pipeline stages here. I named the first cluster 1. And here's the routing. This feature is called routing in drone, where you set node and then the label that you've specified on the runner that you pass to the runner. So I set, remember, cluster :1. So that's where this comes in. So that's all you have to do to set a unique label and then route pipelines to that, to a runner with that unique label in your pipeline. So here, I just have one step that's going to print out the environment. And the same for my second pipeline stage, just cluster 2. Again, node cluster 2, same env output command there. So let's see what happens. Excuse me, if I try to trigger this. Let's just make a commit that will trigger the pipeline. And, you know, I always like to show pull requests being open because that's best practice. Don't commit directly to your main and master branches. Try it in a pull request. Here we go. Now, oh, you know what I did before? What I forgot to do before was activate the repository, I believe. So yes, so here's my drone instance. And I haven't activated this repository yet. So there won't be any webhooks sent from my repository to drone until I do this. So that's why nothing happened when I just opened that pull request. So here, activated it. Now let's do this again. Trigger pipeline. And here we go. So awesome. My two pipeline stages are kicking off. And they're already done. So my repository was cloned and my env step ran the env command. So you can see all the environment variables that were available when that step ran on cluster 1. And then the same for cluster 2. So that's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. And just to prove that those two stages really ran on different agents, on different runners, we can look at the graph view here. I was just looking at the log view. Drone has this graph view that if I go in here and click on one of these pipeline steps, here's my runner name for that cluster 1 step. And we can go back and look at the pod. Actually, that's the name of the pod. So cluster 2, we can see is different, right? Back and forth. So C54CF is the name of the pod in the second cluster. So that's all it takes. It's actually very straightforward to define, to bring up a runner this way, and then to route your pipeline off to it. So something else I wanted to just kind of emphasize while I'm showing this is that because I only have those two runners, if I didn't specify this node parameter, or if I, if I didn't specify it, right, by default, at this point, my pipeline will have nowhere to execute. So I just want to show what that looks like. No labels. So if we look at that again, I just changed my drone YAML. So it no longer has those two stages. It has one stage called default, and it has no more label specified for routing. So what is this going to look like? Well, my pipeline's just going to sit here forever because it has nowhere, drone has nowhere to route this pipeline since no available runner has no labels or has, since I've specified no label, then it would want to send my pipeline to a runner that also does not have a label, and there isn't one at the moment. So I've seen this a couple times before in some questions in the community where pipelines sit here not executing, and that's usually the reason behind it is, well, it's actually usually one of two things. It's usually one of either labels like this or architecture. So drone supports, see if I can find the documentation really quick. Yeah, the search is not super. What if I look for like ARM64 platform, pipeline Docker? Yeah, so sometimes someone will bring up a runner and they will bring it up for an architecture that's not the default. So by default, drone will look for Linux-based AMD 64 architecture runners. So that's most of the world, right, is probably going to be running that kind of runner using Linux and on some Intel-based architecture. But these days, with more and more of ARM architecture in our world with M1 Macs and things like Raspberry Pis and that sort of thing, drone supports those as well, but you would actually have to specify the platform explicitly so that it would get routed correctly. So that's another way that routing comes into play with drone pipelines. Labels is one way, platform operating system and architecture is another. So that's another thing to keep in mind when you're writing your pipelines and you're bringing up your runners. Keep in mind the kind of runners you're starting. Is it on the kind of architecture that drone will be able to route to by default or not, or will you have to specify it? So we can just cancel that one because that's never going to execute. So yeah, in these slides, I was just showing what I showed in the terminal before. And these are the two files that I had, the cluster1 values, which cluster:1 is the only thing I'm passing to that label environment variable, and then cluster2 is the other. So just kind of re-emphasizing what those files look like in case any of that wasn't clear. So yeah, so I hope that was helpful. This is a question, again, that has come up multiple times in the community Slack channel. So hopefully it'll be useful. And yeah, please come and join our community if you haven't already. If you're watching this on YouTube, maybe later on, we have a Slack community at, let's say, find the address again before I don't want to get it wrong. It's harnesscommunity.slack.com. And then we also have community.harness.io is our discourse forum. And yeah, you can find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Bitberk, BITBERK. And yeah, I hope you're enjoying using drone. And if you have any questions, come join our community and hopefully we can help.